In this video, I'll be reviewing the Commsec Pocket App and why I think this can be a great platform for the everyday Aussie who may be new to investing or wants to keep investing very simple. So if you are a new Australian investor who wants to dip their toes in the stock market, then this video is for you, my friend. I will cover each of the 7 ETFs this app provides, the fees involved, how to set up your account, and how to buy and sell these ETFs. So if you're a new beginner, don't feel intimidated, it's actually quite easy to understand. I would also encourage you to watch until the end because I will be providing my thoughts on each of these investment options and which ones I personally like for beginners. So if that sounds good to you, let's get started. What is going on, my friends? My name is Brian and today we are talking about the Commsec Pocket App. There's quite a lot of information to get through in this video, so I've left timestamps down below, so feel free to skip to the sections that you're interested in. And before we begin, I want to say this video is not sponsored by Commsec Pocket, so this is a genuine, honest and unbiased review. Also, I am not a financial advisor and the information I provide today are for entertainment purposes only. Please do your own research or seek the help of a professional if you would like financial advice for your unique situation. So with that out of the way, let's begin. The Commsec Pocket App is a micro-investment broker that offers 7 different investment options in the form of ETFs. ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund, which is a type of investment security that tracks a particular index, sector, or commodity. In simple terms, an ETF acts like a basket of many stocks that you can trade on an exchange, just like an individual stock. So if you buy one share of an ETF, that one share represents a small piece of each of the many companies within that ETF. So you are essentially buying many companies all in one stock. And because you can buy many companies all in one, you are increasing your diversification and in turn reducing your risk. So in theory, an ETF is a safer investment than buying shares of an individual company. So firstly, I will go through the 7 ETF options since that's probably what you came for. And after that, I'll go over other important things like fees, security, and how to buy and sell. So without further ado, let's talk about the first ETF. So the first ETF on the list is IOZ, which is the iShares Core ASX 200 ETF. iShares, who are owned by BlackRock, are the investment company that manages this particular ETF. This ETF is nicknamed Aussie 200, and as the name suggests, it tracks the top 200 Australian companies listed on the ASX. I'm sure you can recognize some of these blue chip companies like CBA, BHP, and Woolworths. By the way, blue chip companies just means it's a well-established and well-known company that has consistent revenue and stable growth over time. If you scroll down, you can see their top 10 companies and how much each of these companies is part of the ETF in percentages. Please note the bigger the company by market cap, the more the ETF will invest in. So it's not like all 200 companies are evenly allocated the same percentage, no matter their size. Generally, the bigger companies will make up a larger slice of the pie. In this case, the top 10 companies make up 46% of the entire ETF. If you are interested, you can download all their holdings on their website, which I'll link in the description. Next, you have the industry coverage, which gives you a percentage of which of the industry the ETF is invested in. So you can see that IOZ is mainly made up of financial services and basic material companies. Financial services make up 29%, which includes the big 4 banks, Commonwealth, Westpac, ANZ and NAB. Basic materials make up 24%, which includes the big mining companies like BHP, Rio Tinto and FMG. This does make sense because the top companies in Australia are mainly banks and mining companies. You can see the remaining industries are made up of healthcare, real estate, consumer cyclical, industrials, among others. If we skip ahead, we can see the current price of the ETF and how the stock has performed 1 week ago, 1 month ago, 1 year ago, 5 years ago, and even when it first started. So you can go ahead and play around with this. If we select all, we can see it started in 2010 and has a healthy looking growth chart until we get to March 2020, which is of course when the pandemic locked down the world. But as you can see, we recovered quite quickly from that, which proves the resilience of this ETF and ASX in general. In the next area, you'll see the performance returns. In the last year, this ETF has returned about 10% and about 8% on average in the last 2 to 3 years. They also state something very important. Remember that past performance isn't necessarily indicative of future performance. This is a very good lesson to remember when it comes to stock market investing. You should look at the historical price performance as a guide only. Generally speaking, stocks that track an index like this one does go up in the long term, but remember, it is not guaranteed, so only invest money that you can afford to lose. So moving on, if we click more info about this ETF, it will show you the management fee they charge for managing this ETF. IOZ charges 0.09%, which is actually quite cheap in my opinion. And don't worry, if you do decide to invest in this ETF or any other ETF for that matter, you don't have to remember to physically pay the fee every year. It is automatically deducted from the unit price of the ETF itself. It also states that this ETF pays a dividend to its investors 4 times a year. A dividend is basically a small payment a stock makes to its investors as a thank you for continuing to invest in their stock. So in the last 12 months, IOZ paid 4.49% in dividends for the year. I want to point out that this is a bit high and you should not expect dividends this high every single year. In fact, a dividend is not guaranteed and the management team can choose not to pay a dividend at any given time. But generally speaking, they will pay a dividend every year. The last part is the risk to consider that Commsec Pocket has put together. These are some generic investing tips for new investors, which I would recommend you have a look at. I really like that they've done this because there are some very important information to know if you are a beginner. It teaches you both the benefits and risks of investing, and I would highly recommend you read it if you're new to investing. The second ETF is SYI, which is the SPDR Australia High Dividend ETF. As the nickname Aussie Dividend suggests, this ETF offers exposure to approximately 40 Australian companies that have a 5-year track record of consistently paying dividends. If you scroll down, you can see the top 10 companies which make up 68% of the entire ETF. You will notice the largest 3 companies, BHP, Rio Tinto, and Fortescue Metals, are all mining companies which make up 38% of the ETF. Then you have some familiar names like Wesfarmers, who owns Bunnings, Kmart, Officeworks, and many other Aussie companies. And normally you would have the big 4 Australian banks in this ETF, but I'm guessing they are not currently in there because they stopped paying dividends for several quarters during the pandemic in 2020. I'm guessing this breached the prerequisite of the ETF to have a 5-year track record of consistent dividends. You will notice that majority of these companies are well-established companies with predictable yearly revenue, which makes them perfect as a dividend play. If you scroll down, you'll see the industry coverage as usual. We won't stick around here for too long because we already know that majority of the companies are mining, which falls under basic materials, as well as consumer cyclicals and defensive, which includes Coles and JB Hi-Fi. If you look at the price history of the stock, you'll notice the price hasn't gone up much in the last 10 years. This is because the ETF pays a high dividend yield. When a dividend is paid, the value is deducted from the stock price. So this ETF is more appropriate for people looking for an investment that can produce consistent cash flow rather than consistent growth. But please note, this assumes that dividends are reinvested, which is why the stock market return is so high, which I'll explain more shortly. The last 3 years average return is about 7.81%, which is decent. But again, that is assuming you reinvest all dividends. The ETF charges 0.35% management fee, which I feel is a little bit high, but not too unreasonable if you're looking for a dividend investment. The dividend yield for the last 12 months is about 10%. I can tell you right now that is quite high, and you should not expect such a high number every year. Also, if the stock price underperforms, it usually produces a higher dividend yield, so it could be misleading. So if you are interested in this type of ETF, I would suggest you do more research on dividend yields and how they work so you don't fall into the trap of only choosing stocks with high dividend yields. The third ETF is IOO, which is the iShares Global 100 ETF. This ETF offers exposure to around 100 of the largest companies in the world. Did you know the Australian stock market only accounts for 2% of the global stock market? Investing in IOO gives you the ability to diversify into the world's best blue chip companies, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Johnson & Johnson, and Samsung. I will leave a link in the description to the full list of the stocks in this ETF, as well as a fact sheet so you can learn more about this ETF. In fact, I'll do the same for all 7 ETFs that Commsec Pocket provides, so check the description for more information on each of these ETFs. As you can see in the industry breakdown, this ETF is quite tech heavy, with 31% of the stocks being technology companies. This makes sense since many of the largest companies in the world these days are involved in tech, so it's only fitting that the best 100 global ETF would have a heavy representation of tech stocks. And if you look at the price chart, the stock has performed amazingly well since its inception in 2007. In fact, it returned 25% last year and about 17% on average in the last 3 years. This is mainly due to the rise in tech stocks over the last decade. The management fee is 0.4%, which I think is a bit pricey, but not super unreasonable. You are getting a lot of great companies all in one. They also paid about a 2% dividend last year, which actually isn't too bad considering this ETF is more like a growth stock rather than a dividend stock. The dividends are paid twice a year if you invest in this ETF. Again, if you're interested and want more information on this ETF, check out the link in the description. The fourth ETF is IEM, which is the iShares MSCI Emerging Markets ETF. In the stock market world, we generally categorize markets into 2 categories: developed markets and emerging markets. Developed markets are countries like Australia, New Zealand, the US, and the UK. Emerging markets do not currently have the same economic strength like the countries I just mentioned, but they are in the process of becoming a developed economy. This particular ETF offers access to over 800 companies from emerging markets like China, Taiwan, South Korea, and India. These are countries where the companies are on the rise and could be future blue chip companies. If we look at the top 10 companies, they include the Taiwan Semiconductor Company, which is the largest semiconductor chip manufacturer in the world, which is a very important component for electronic goods. They also have Tencent, which owns WeChat, which is the most popular social media app in China, Samsung, which is a Korean electronics company, which I'm sure you've heard about, and of course Alibaba, which is the largest e-commerce company in China, and Asia for that matter. As usual, you can see their industry coverage with quite an even spread of different sectors like tech, financial services, and basic materials. The price of the stock has been quite volatile, which is matched by the yearly performance. The ETF actually made a 6% loss last year and returned about 4% on average for the last 3 years. That's the thing with emerging markets, it is a higher risk, higher reward type of investment. They also charge 0.68% management fees, which to be honest is quite pricey, but to be fair, other ETFs that offer similar products also charge quite a high fee since it's a bit harder to manage. They also paid a dividend of 3% last year, so not too shabby. If you're interested in this ETF, you can find more information in the link below. The fifth ETF is IXJ, which is the iShares Global Healthcare ETF. This ETF is nicknamed HealthWise and it contains around 100 of the biggest healthcare companies in the world. So if you think healthcare will continue to do well, then you may want to consider researching this ETF. The last few years has demonstrated the importance of these healthcare companies in combating diseases and illnesses by continuing to innovate, develop, and produce treatments. This ETF includes companies like United Health Group, Johnson & Johnson, and Pfizer, which is a company I'm sure you've heard a lot about in the last few years. Obviously, this ETF is 100% invested in healthcare industry, so we don't need to cover that for too long. The price history shows it has grown steadily since its inception in 2009. This demonstrates a linear growth in line with the improvement of modern healthcare. The last year returned 20% to its investors and about 11% on average in the last 3 years. Not too bad at all. They charge a 0.46% management fee, which isn't too bad for this type of ETF. The dividend rate was 2.39% in the last 12 months, which is quite decent, especially if you also factor in their share price growth. And as mentioned before, if you want to learn more about this ETF, you can click on the link in the description. The sixth ETF is ETHI, which is the BetaShares Global Sustainable Leaders ETF. Similar to iShares, BetaShares is just a company that manages this ETF. This ETF offers exposure to around 200 of the leading sustainable and ethical companies. So to be in this ETF, each company is individually assessed and must pass their strict criteria. They carefully choose companies that are climate leaders and exclude companies with significant exposure to fossil fuels or engages in activities that are deemed to be unethical. If you are interested in learning more on the screening process, there is a PDF on their website which goes into more detail. I will leave a link in the description. With the world moving towards a more sustainable future, the trend towards responsible investing has grown rapidly. Studies have shown that ethical investing is particularly popular amongst millennials, with a lot of money flowing into Australian sustainable investment funds in recent years. A recent survey of the Australian ETF market found 28% of younger investors had requested more ethical investments. This ETF in particular has gained popularity amongst those who wish to invest in companies that align with their beliefs. Some of the top companies in this ETF includes Nvidia, Apple, Visa, and Toyota, which I think is a surprising inclusion. Despite being a car company which runs on fossil fuel, Toyota has made it its mission to phase out fossil fuel cars with greener options. If you look at their price history, it has performed very well since its inception in 2017. It returned 17% in the last year and about 21% on average in the last 3 years. And as awareness for ethical investing grows, so will the popularity in this ETF. This ETF charges a 0.49% management fee, which is quite reasonable for the work they do to carefully screen their investments. And they paid a 1.77% dividend last year, which is a bonus to their impressive share price returns. Overall, it is a very solid investment. The seventh and last ETF is NDQ, which is the BetaShares Nasdaq 100 ETF. As the name tech savvy suggests, this ETF offers exposure to around 100 of the largest technology and non-financial companies on the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq is an American stock exchange where people can invest in the largest tech and non-financial companies. If you look at the top companies on the list, you can see it is home to well-known tech giants like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla, Nvidia, Google, and Facebook, which is now known as Meta Platforms. If you look at the industry coverage, you'll see 50% is pure tech stocks, but there are some other industries like communication services such as Facebook and Google, which to be honest, I think should still be classified as tech. Then you have consumer cyclical and defensive companies like PepsiCo, Costco, and Starbucks. So it is made up of mainly tech and a few other industries. If you look at the price history since inception in 2015, this ETF has performed amazingly well for their investors. If you have been following the financial news in the last decade, you will know that US tech companies have been on the tear and dominating the stock market. This ETF returned 18% in the last year and an average of 25% in the last 3 years. These are absolutely phenomenal returns for an ETF which requires very little work to invest in. They charge 0.38% management fees, which is very reasonable considering what they have returned to their investors in the last few years. They paid a 0.77% dividend in the last 12 months, which is a bit low but understandable since this is more of a growth ETF and most of the gains are expected from the share price appreciation. As always, if you want to learn more about this ETF, then click the link in the description. Alright, now that we've gone over the 7 investment options, let's talk about the fees. There are 2 types of fees you should know about when investing in these ETFs. First is the management fees, which I've already covered, but they are the fees a company charge for managing the ETF. These fees are not charged out of pocket and are automatically deducted from the share price. The second is the brokerage fee, which is the fee you pay to the broker for buying or selling the ETF. Commsec Pocket charges $2 brokerage each time you buy or sell one of these ETFs up to $1,000. Trades over $1,000 are charged 0.2% of the trade. So for example, if you buy $1,200 of IOO, it will cost you $2.40 in brokerage fees. This is very cheap when compared to other brokers and it's one of the lowest, if not the lowest fee in Australia. You can start investing from as little as $50, but to be honest, I would recommend saving up a bit more, otherwise those brokerage fees will start eating into your investments. Paying $2 brokerage for a $50 trade means you're paying 4% of the total investment. This means your investment would have to perform very well just to make up that 4%. Instead, I would aim to only pay a maximum of 1% brokerage for each trade. So since the brokerage is $2, try to buy at least $200 or higher. These low brokerage fees also allow you to dollar cost average without breaking the bank. If you're new to investing, then dollar cost averaging is a strategy of regularly buying the same amount of shares every week or month, regardless of the price. Since it's basically impossible to time the market, this strategy allows us to get the market average price over time and has historically been proven to be a very effective strategy. In terms of security, it is probably one of the safest platforms because they are owned and backed by Commonwealth Bank, which is the largest bank in Australia. So you can rest assured knowing your shares are in safe hands. And even in the unlikely event that something happens to Commonwealth Bank, the insurance will cover any damages to your investments. In addition, Commsec Pocket is CHESS sponsored, which means they issue you an individual holder identification number, or HIN, and your shares are registered with CHESS on the ASX. This means Commsec does not own your shares and they are legally registered under your name, which adds an extra layer of security. This also gives you the freedom to move your shares to another broker if you no longer want to use Commsec Pocket in the future. Now let's talk about setting up your Commsec Pocket account. The entire process is very easy. You can search Commsec Pocket in your Apple App Store or Google Play. From there, you just follow the prompts. You will also need to open a Commonwealth Bank account to use this app. So if you're already a CBA customer, then great, you can get started straight away. If not, then you can open an everyday account with them. The account is free if you're under 25 years of age or a part-time or full-time student at an Australian educational institution. You also qualify if you're undertaking an Australian apprenticeship on student options. If you're none of these, then you can also get your account for free if you deposit $2,000 in there every month. So like me, you could just deposit your paycheck into this account every month and instantly transfer it out to another account if you want. Also, as a quick FYI, because I see this question get asked a lot in finance forums, if you're already a Commsec customer, you will get a separate portfolio for Commsec Pocket. So it will be your normal Commsec account and your Commsec Pocket account will be next to it. And if you ever want to combine them, I've heard it's quite easy to transfer everything across with a few clicks. Now let's talk about how to buy and sell these ETFs. Once your Commsec Pocket account is approved, it should then allow you to link it with your Commonwealth Bank account. If you want to buy something from the Commsec Pocket app, the money will be deducted from your Commonwealth Bank account. You just need to remember to keep your account funded to at least the amount that you have bought. For example, if you buy $1,000 of IOZ, then make sure you have $1,000 in your bank account. They will usually deduct the money in 2 business days. Now let me demonstrate how to buy and sell on the app. Okay, so buying and selling on this app is very easy to do. If you want to buy, just come to this section on the app and choose one of the 7 options. For this example, I'll use IOZ. Say you want to buy $1,000 worth, you just enter $1,000, then click next and it will bring you to this screen. Now, since you have to buy a full unit of the shares, it will round off to the nearest unit. In this case, you will get 32 units of IOZ and it will cost you $997.84, including the $2 brokerage fees. If you're happy with that, then click invest and the order should go through instantly, and congratulations, you just bought some IOZ shares. Now to sell, you will have to bring up the ETF you want to sell. For this example, I will use my NDQ shares that I currently own. Click sell on the bottom left of the screen, then you can select how many units you would like to sell. So in this example, I'll put 50 units and it will bring me to this page. Now it's telling me 50 units is approximately $1,500 worth of the ETF and the brokerage will be about $3. If you're happy with that, then click sell and again, it should go through instantly and you have just sold some shares. It's as easy as that, guys. Now with all these ETFs, they are not just exclusive to Commsec Pocket. You can in fact find them in every broker that offers ASX stocks. So for example, if you search the ticker symbol on Selforth or Perla, you can buy it from these brokers. The only difference is the brokerage fee will be much higher. Buying $1,000 of IOZ here will cost $10 compared to $2 in Commsec Pocket app. One last thing I want to add before I wrap up this video is to check out this Learn tab on this app. I think if you're a beginner, it's worthwhile to scroll through these as they provide very good information in an easy to understand format. It gives you tips on how to use Commsec Pocket as well as some generic investing tips which will make you a better investor in the future. So I highly recommend you go through this tab and learn and absorb as much as you can, because at the end of the day, knowledge is power. So there you have it, guys. That is everything you need to know about Commsec Pocket app. So to give you my final thoughts, would I recommend this platform? The answer is yes. In my opinion, this is a good starting point if you are a new investor. It is a nice sleek design which is easy to use and does not feel too intimidating for a new investor. Now you may be asking which ETF to invest in as a beginner. Obviously, I can't give you direct financial advice since I'm not a financial advisor and I don't know your personal circumstances. But I will say I like IOZ, IOO, ETHI and NDQ. I've actually invested in some of these in the past and actually still hold one of them until this day, which has performed very well for me. There are other ETFs out there which are comparable to these, and you can do a quick Google comparison to compare their performance and management fees. But at the end of the day, for what Commsec offers and their low brokerage fees, I think these are some very decent options for new investors. Once you become a more experienced investor, you can always switch to an online broker that offers more choices. And like I mentioned previously, Commsec Pocket is CHESS sponsored, so you can easily transfer your shares to another broker if you want to keep everything in one spot. So in short, I think Commsec Pocket app is a good choice, but it's not a necessity. You can skip straight to another broker that offers more options. If you're interested in learning more about how to invest, then check out these videos. Also, please give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out any future content. And until next time, my name is Brian, and I hope you make a lot of money.